Hello, Bryan.
Hello.
Welcome to Belgium.
Thank you very much.
We haven't heard from you for at least 2 years. Why has it taken so long to release the new album, Boys and Girls?
Well, it just took a long time to get it right. I wanted it to be a very special album because it was going to be the first thing after Roxy had finished, and so there was an awful lot of pressure on me to make it good, because Avalon was the best received record we'd ever made throughout the world. So I just persevered, and it seems unusual to some people to take so long to make a record. For me, as an artist, it didn't seem such a long time between pieces. I mean, 2 or 3 years, whatever it was, is a little bit long, but it's not, between two shows of work, as it were.
You have something like 25 musicians on the new album.
Yeah, about 30 actually, yeah.
Do you not feel that some of the spontaneity and emotion that you have constantly working with only 4 or 5 people has been lost?
Not really, because for me, I really wanted to experiment with different combinations of players. I mean, there are never 30 playing at the same time, it's always different combinations of people. And all of the people I worked with were all kind of feel players and emotional players and intuitive players also. And what I always try to do is, as often as possible, use first takes of performance, so somebody will hear the music and the mood and the atmosphere that I built up myself with keyboards and whatever, and they'll respond to that without me telling them what it is or explaining anything. And I like to try and use the initial response as much as possible and kind of freeze that direct emotional contact that you get from these sort of people. And it was a very satisfying album because of all the skillful and people who were involved in it, because they're all very much at the top of their tree musically,
And you no longer have a band to fall back on if the album would fail commercially. Are you afraid of the responsibility?
Sure, because there's a great security in any sort of brand name, group brand name, that you spend 12 years or so building up. And that's why I think a lot of groups stay together too long, because of that very genuine fear that they won't be as successful without that mark, if you like. And I don't know, you just really have to trust your own instincts and hope that it'll reach out to people and they'll like what they hear. I mean, I tend not to think about the audience. It's too frightening until the thing is finished. As soon as it's finished and you stop fiddling around with it and stop touching it, and you're dragged away from it, which was a bit like that this time, then you start wondering, then you start getting nervous. But I think it's a mistake to worry about it while you're making the thing. You really have to just put your head down. I find, anyway, it's the best way for me. Just put my head down, get into the thing totally, and push every idea as far as you can. Question everything that you do. Try and make it as good as you can at each stage.
But because it's taken you so long, because you like to work that way, the original spark and the emotion to make the music, do you feel that lasts over?
I don't know. I mean, it's a very interesting question, and it's something that I was aware of all the time, because I didn't want it to disappear, and I didn't want to refine the music too much or polish it up too much so that the original spark was lost. So that's always the fine line, and that's where the tension lies between recording this, as I said before, this hopefully heartfelt, instinctive performance that you get out of everybody, including yourself, hopefully, and the thing of structuring it and trying to create something interesting texture-wise and so on.
Do you
so it's like, you hope that you won't lose it while you're kind of formalizing it.
Do you suffer for your art?
Yeah, I think you have to. every album I've made, especially all the Roxy albums, have been made in this way, where you drive everybody crazy who works around, works with you. But it's always, to me, the only way to make records, because it's an old-fashioned attitude, perhaps, and one that comes through an interest in art and the feeling that I've always felt I'm an artist rather than a personality or a musician or whatever. I always want to be judged as an artist, and I've always felt that the art I responded to most as a listener and a viewer was always something which had a bit of soul in it somewhere.
Yeah.
And with music, I was always drawn to the painful music, whether it was kind of jazz, blues, soul, whatever, something which had some very strong emotion there.
One inevitable question, only one, about Roxy. There seems to have been a lot of personality clashes towards the end. Is that the main reason why you had to break up the band?
Yeah, really. It became more and more kind of a difficult situation, because in order to keep the music alive for me, more and more so in the last phase, the last 3 albums, I had to kind of bring in new talent all the time, different players, which made the records more interesting, I think, and certainly better from my point of view, in making them. And obviously that created sort of frustrations and so on within the group, and it just became, it just seemed that the best way for all parties, really, creatively, was to split it up, was to end it, and to end it on a sort of high note with Avalon, which was the biggest success we'd ever had, rather than to sort of drag it on, under that sort of trade name basis of, well, we've got a good thing going here, lads, which I think a lot of, I think perhaps a lot of groups do that, and it's very hard to know when the right moment is to end a sort of partnership like that. But it felt like it felt as if it couldn't really go on any longer.
How do you feel about the public image that's been created for Bryan Ferry?
Well, I don't know what to say about it. I sometimes don't really know it very well. Sometimes it feels like a kind of person sitting next to me, sort of like a shadow that has a life of its own. And because of things, over the years, that image becomes distorted and takes on a whole kind of existence of its own, which isn't nurtured by me. It's sort of built up, really by other people and what they say and so on, and then those people are quoted by somebody else, and so the thing takes on a momentum of its own,
Did it ever at any one point actually overtake the real you, the private Bryan Ferry?
It's never really, I've never allowed it to overtake. What I have done the past few years is consciously live a much lower profile in order to try and let my work have some space to breathe in, rather than for it to be overshadowed by this strange creature, which is partly me, but usually it's seemed to me a fairly unpleasant image. And if I've read things about myself, I've thought, oh well, God, I don't like that person, and I certainly wouldn't like to listen to his music. And that really made me think,
How do you feel comfortable selling yourself ultimately as a product to be sold and to promote?
No, I don't. I'd love to be invisible and not to be my own product in a way. It's sometimes it's very hard, that whole part of it. Sometimes you wish that you were a sort of Phil Spector type of figure and always behind. And with Roxy I had some I had that to some extent, in as much as I could live behind this rather attractive name, which was never tarnished. This image was never tarnished, but in the same way that my own name was.
You seem slightly more introverted on the new material. Is that conscious?
Well, I think I felt that's one way I could go, was further into myself. It's like when I started making records, I remember the first couple of albums, I felt as if I was completely in a space of my own, and that there was nobody else manoeuvring, operating there at all. And over the years, I think people have kind of come into music, perhaps with the same sort of attitude that I have, similar attitude or something. And I sometimes look around, or people point out things and say, "Have you heard that group? It sounds a bit like you," or da 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 da. So you think, well, where can I go? You know, I don't want to sound like them. So you go. The only way I can go is further into myself, and so I think that's a characteristic probably of this record.
Did you deliberately choose a photographer, Jean-Baptiste Mondino, for your clip?
Well, I looked, when I finished the album, I looked around hurriedly at reels of work, show reels of directors, and I liked his very much. I thought it was very strong, and he obviously knew something about music, and just the way there was a kind of sensuality about his work, which I liked. And I met him, and we got on really well. He's really funny, good sense of humour, which is always important, by the way. In any working relationship, you've got to be able to laugh. And I gave him the song, Slave to Love, and said, here you are, you know, you come up with an idea, you make it. And I had a little bit to do with it, but it's basically his work. And it's always difficult with videos because it's a different world from music. I tend to like myself to infer things, to imply things in music. It's a much more abstract, ephemeral thing. And the whole thing of pinning down music to a specific visual image is it's difficult. You know, I could give the same song to 20 different directors and they'd all be different, which is kind of one of the interesting things about it, I suppose. So I gave it to him, and I really liked what he did, and I like working with him, and I'd like to do something with him again.